Welcome back to Jason in Space, the podcast where we slice and dice our way through Jason X 13 minutes at a time. I'm Brian.
And I'm Evil Gets an Up, Greg.
Ba-dum-bum. This segment begins with Jason standing in the doorway and ends with Sunaran and the gang running down a hallway. So right as Jason has entered the room, Waylander's like, "Now what?" And Janessa says, "Basically, we die."
Yeah, I feel like Joss Whedon came and did an uncredited script polish. This has a lot of his trademark witticisms.
But Waylander doesn't think it's time to die, so he pulls out his gun, but it doesn't work. So the three of them are now cornered by Jason. One thing I did like about this scene is that even though the three of them are scared, I do like how Janessa and Rowan aren't screaming and being hysterical like you would normally see in these types of movies. They're actually like quite composed and in control of the situation, and they're just like, okay, let's deal with this. And so I liked seeing that kind of strength from some female characters for a change.
Yeah, it's nice that they keep their heads about them, even though Janessa is a little bit defeatist in her attitude, but Rowan in particular seems like she's just treating this as a series of problems to be solved, and that's kind of cool. Just as he's about to reach them, Sunaran strolls into the corridor behind Jason and says, "Hey, Slappy, got a little something for you," which turns out to be KM, dressed in a new Matrix-style leather dominatrix outfit. Apparently, Sunaran gave her an upload, which I really don't want to read too much into.
Jason wastes no time taking on this challenge, and he chucks his machete across the room, impaling KM through the chest. This immediately knocks her to her knees, and Jason walks up to KM and starts to remove the machete. Except KM isn't dead because she's an android, motherfuckers!
It was all a ruse. She grabs his arm and then pulls out her fucking huge guns and unloads on him. There's a series of attacks with flips and bullets flying all over the place. It's very much an anime-style, Matrix bullet-festooned extravaganza.
So I'm not really sure what Sunaran's upgrade was here. Was it the weapons or was it KM? Because if those guns, if it existed this entire time, why weren't the grunts using it before? Because they were doing some serious damage to Jason. So the guns aren't part of KM. Those were just accessories. Right.
I mean, I think that the upload that he gave her was twofold. One was, I assume they physically consummated their relationship, which increased her desire to save everyone, or at least, kind of kicked her protective instincts into overdrive. But I also think that he may have uploaded some sort of combat protocols into her mainframe. She didn't seem to be a combat model before this, and now she's like this, expert hand-to-hand combatant, using guns and flipping and stuff. So I feel like the upload, / upgrade was to her software package. She's even got kind of a new attitude. She's a lot cheekier than she had been. She seemed a lot more naive and sweet-tempered, and now she's got a little bit more of an edge. So I think she's relishing her new outlook.
This hail of gunfire from KM sends Jason flying, at least 50 feet backwards. But there's some weird geographic inconsistency here because Jason was standing between Janessa, Rowan, and Waylander, and KM and Sunaran. But when he goes flying straight back, he falls into an open hallway that I'm presuming was off to the side of him. So we don't really see him kind of change directions. As KM's shooting him, like Jason was coming toward her head on, and she's shooting him and he's going straight back, but somehow he ends flying down a hallway onto the left. But regardless, KM does a double flip into that hallway that Steven from Jason Goes to Hell would be jealous of. She pulls out 2 machine pistols and continues to pummel Jason with a hail of bullets and spin kicks. Each shot is sending Jason further and further down the hallway. And then KM cartwheels her way down the hall to catch up to him, where she continues to hit Jason with a barrage of bullets and kicks and punches. Jason manages to knock KM to the ground, which is when Brodsky comes out of nowhere and stabs Jason in the arm with a knife. And KM, exhibiting that new attitude that you mentioned, says, "I had it covered, but thanks."
She shoots the wall around Jason and then blows him. Wait, how did that work?
Yeah, please finish that sentence.
She shoots the wall around him and then blows off his right arm. Kicking him through that shot-up wall, she then shotguns his left leg off. He collapses backward onto an exam table, and she shoots another hole in him, then points directly at the camera, fires a bullet, and blows off 60% of his head. Then, as a final fuck you, she flings his machete, lodging it in his destroyed torso.
I love how the rest of the gang shows up and they just can't believe what they see. Just like Jason just completely laid to waste on this examination table. They're like, "Damn, girl."
But then they're even more horrified and shocked when KM grabs Sunaran and said, "Who's your mama?" and smacks a huge hot kiss on him. Ugh. There's a lot of mama and daddy talk in this.
We make our way back to Lab 2, where Sunaran, Janessa, Waylander, KM, and Rowan are fixing up Brodsky. They're using those nano ants, and they're crawling all over his chest, which is kind of a cool effect because he's pretty beaten up, but you see the ants kind of doing their job as they're crawling all over him. Just then, the ship starts to shake pretty violently, and Waylander does some quick diagnostics and determines that the collision from Kinza's poor flying skills has compromised the hull of the Grendel, and the ship is actually bleeding out. It's just then when we hear someone over the radio say, "Tiamat to Grendel." Tiamat, in the religion of ancient Babylon, is the primordial goddess of the sea, mating with Abuzu, the god of the groundwater, to produce younger gods. She is the symbol of chaos of the primordial creation. But anyway, the Tiamat is a ship that has heard Grendel's distress beacon and asks if they need any help. They say they're 4 parsecs away and can be there in 45 minutes. A parsec is a unit of distance used in astronomy equal to about 3.26 light years, or 30.9 trillion kilometers. Since they're 4 parsecs away, they are 123.6 trillion kilometers, or 76.8 trillion miles from the Grendel. So if they can be there in 45 minutes, that means that they're traveling at about 101 trillion miles an hour.
Unfortunately, the ship is going to detonate in 30 minutes, so Tiamat getting there in 45 isn't going to do them a lot of good. There's some back and forth about whether or not they want the Tiamat to continue on their way, but they finally get the idea to try what's basically a saucer separation on Star Trek. If they can blow one pontoon of the Grendel away and use the other one to stave off the explosion, then that will give them a chance to escape by rescue. Everyone scampers off to enact their plan, but they've left the nanites active, and it begins to cycle up on Jason's ruined table. We get an amusing shot of the nanite process monitor. It's an Apple with some pretty shitty 90s graphics going on.
The computer screen says that there's insufficient tissue for nanotech reconstruction, so it's going to abort the procedure. But then the computer says, "Abort denied, searching for synthetic cellular replacement." And that's when we see the nano ants scatter from Jason's body and start crawling around the lab floor.
That's a cute touch. It's a detail that, they're using it to set up something that's coming in a few minutes, but it was sort of almost unnecessary. I'm glad they included it. It just seemed like they were really thinking it through, which is frankly a nice change of pace from a lot of these movies. And the other praise that I want to throw their way is that, the effects of the nanite ants crawling all over Jason's body and around the room are a little bit janky. I mean, it's very kind of rough CGI, but I gotta say that it's better than you would expect for a movie like this. They clearly did a nice job with the limitations they had budget-wise.
Because the ship is scheduled to explode in 30 minutes and the Tiamat is not going to be there for 45 minutes, Rowan comes up with the idea of hiding out in one of the pontoons of the ship in order to separate themselves from the explosion in the main ship. So sooner on, Rowan, Janessa, and Waylander all scatter around the ship and start placing charges along the walkways that connect the ship to this particular pontoon. As they place the last charge on the other end of the hallway, they're met by Jason. But Evil has gotten an upgrade. It's clear now that the missing tissue has been replaced by materials found around the lab. It mostly looks like metal. His left leg that was blown off is now replaced by a metal leg, as is his right arm and right side of his chest. His hockey mask has basically become his face now, with his head growing around it. He has 2 red glowing eyes, and he's also carrying a knife of some sort.
This is kind of the money shot of the movie. I mean, it's they used it heavily in the marketing because it's just it's so silly, but it's such a kick-ass idea. And Jason looks great. It's he's surrounded by smoke from all these explosions going on throughout the ship, and I really love that he's now got these like Sith Lord red eyes that are glaring through the holes of the chrome hockey mask, and he looks badass. It's pretty great. My only complaint about this shot is the musical score. Harry Manfredini's awesome and we love him, but it just doesn't seem like this snippet of music was cut for the shot in question. There's no fanfare. There's no, declaration of, the big moment. It's just sort of interstitial background music.
You're right. This should have been a much bigger reveal than it was. There's very little time that passes between when we see the nano ants scattering around the lab looking for additional resources, and then Jason showing up around the corner. I mean, it's in terms of screen time, it's less than 30 seconds, so we don't even really have a chance to prepare ourselves to what's to come, and then he shows up, and it's a pretty big deal. This is uber Jason. We've never seen him before. And like you said, the music is just a little anticlimactic considering the moment. It should have been a bigger, musical sting that's just like, dun, 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 like, holy shit, look at this guy. But it's just like, he just shows up and they're like, oh, it's him. One thing that apparently also happened as the nano ants were scattering around the lab is that they went into other corners of the ship and were taking biological resources from people like Gecko that were, already laying on the ground and dead. We don't see that happen. I don't remember where I read it, but apparently that was part of the process. They weren't just going around, the ants weren't just going around and picking up, metal or plastics or whatever to recreate Jason. They were also looking for biological material to replace the parts that were lost.
That's a pretty adaptive and improvisational software package for the nanite ants. I'm impressed. Everyone is flabbergasted at Jason's new appearance, but KM, keeping a level head, tries shooting him with her machine pistols. Uber Jason comically looks down at himself and says, that didn't do shit, and then punches off KM's head.
Understandably, Sooneron is upset at the sight of his love bot getting her head knocked off. So as he goes to pick up KM's head, Jason raises his arm up to stab him, but Rowan manages to briefly hold him off. Waylander jumps in and immediately gets knocked down by Jason, allowing Rowan to free herself from Jason's other hand. Janessa runs out and starts to close the door to the walkway, and Rowan and Sooneron are able to get out in time, but Jason knocks Waylander down to the ground again.
I thought it was a little bit creepy that Sooneron is carrying KM's head away as they escape. Is he saving it for later?
Ew. Brodsky shows up just as the door locks behind them, and he asks, "What the hell's going on?" And Rowan goes, "Jason fucking Voorhees, that's what's going on." With the door now locked, Jason and Waylander are stuck in the walkway together. Waylander raises his hand to show Jason that he's still holding the remote for the explosives, and he goes, "Hey, asshole!" Waylander triggers the remote, exploding the walkways and separating the pontoon from the main ship.
A very heroic death. He knew he was screwed either way, so I love that he had the presence of mind to hang on to that detonation control and then basically save everyone else by sacrificing his own life. Waylander was played by Derwin Jordan. I was going down a rabbit hole looking at his credits and saw a credit for the Howard Stern movie Private Parts, which made me stop and think, remember when we lived in a day and age when Howard Stern starred in a movie about himself? I was mulling this turn of events over when I realized I was looking at the wrong actor. There was an actor who was born in 1931 and died in the year 2000 named Jordan Derwin, not Derwin Jordan. So then I looked up the correct actor, and Derwin Jordan, who is Waylander, was in some good shows like 24, Community, Sons of Anarchy, and Scandal. He was also in the syndicated TV show Nightman, which is a kind of goofy superhero, vigilante, and also appeared in Queer as Folk, as did several other members of this cast. Thankfully, he does have Jason X on his list of acting credits on his website.
Thanks to Waylander's heroics, Rowan, Janessa, Sunaran, who's still cradling KM's head, and Brodsky all appear to be okay, as does the remains of the Grendel. KM even says that she would clap if she could.
Yeah, there are some fun shots here of KM's head being cradled by Sunaran, and in some shots it's very clearly a dummy head, but in others, depending on how the shot is framed, it's the actress Lisa Ryder. She'll blink or talk or say something, and it's just amusing to picture what contorted position she's forced to be in the rest of the shot that we can't see, that's been framed out. Probably wearing, some sort of green screen outfit so they can, digitally erase parts of her body that might be showing up. But she's basically having to lean over backward and have the other actor's arm around her neck as though he's holding her like a football. Tiamat, the rescue ship, arrives. But fuck! Uber Jason punches a hole through the bulkhead. It's about the size of a grapefruit, but is large enough that the ship undergoes explosive decompression. Everyone manages to make it safely out of this room, except for Janessa. She does a Ripley reenactment using the floor grate and being sucked toward the hole behind her. Everyone struggles to save her, but she has just enough time to make a "this sucks on so many levels" pun before losing her grip and getting pulped by the hole in the bulkhead. It's a great kill, and we don't see a ton. It leaves some residue behind that looks a little bit like the ectoplasm from Poltergeist. But I do like the detail that there's a piece of floor grating that got sucked against the hole before she gets there. So she's essentially strained through the piece of grating instead of just being sucked through the hole. It's actually better than the explosive decompression kill in Alien Resurrection, despite being less graphic than that one.
I had to go back and watch the scene because I remember that there was the hole there from Jason punching it, but I didn't remember why there was a grate there. And so there's a lot of things flying around the scene as Janessa's holding on to the floor grate. And there's a grate that's on the wall that gets blown off and covers the hole. And you're right, it kind of makes for a more interesting kill, because the whole time when I watched it the first time, I was expecting her to just go through the hole and kind of be sucked through like she's being flushed down a toilet or something. But the grate adds a nice layer of resistance and complexity to it. But unfortunately, we just don't get to see the body go through. We just see the remains, and it's fine. It's probably for the best, but it was a nice little touch.
Yeah, it allowed our imaginations to work a little harder. They evoke what would have happened to her body, but we don't get to see it. So that adds a nice layer of additional damage. Janessa was played by Melissa Aid, who hasn't done a ton. She was in Interstate 60, which was Bob Gale's directorial debut. He was the guy who wrote Back to the Future. She's been quiet since 2013, but she did appear in the Crystal Lake Memories documentary and seems to be fond of having been in this movie, which is always nice to see.
She also hosted Toronto's Winnie the Pooh Friendship Festival in 1998.
If only we'd known. Instead of BotCon, we could have gone to the Winnie the Pooh Friendship Festival.
With Janessa gone, Brodsky, Rowan, and Sunaran are able to secure themselves behind an airtight door. Through the porthole in the door, they can see Jason continuing to punch his way through the wall of the room they were just in, so they make a run for it. And that's where the segment ends.
just 2 deaths this time. Waylander goes out in a spectacular display of heroism, and Janessa gets sucked through the grate.
To see what happens when Greg and I go through the nanotech reconstruction process, tune in next week to another episode of You're All
Doomed.